Queen Celestara sat at her desk, reading the resignation letter with barely contained exhaustion. The words blurred together after the first paragraph, but the message was crystal clear. Nanny number 17 was quitting, effective immediately. Psychological damage, the letter claimed in formal, clinical language. Empathic overload beyond acceptable professional risk. The royal children require intervention I am not equipped to provide. I recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation and possible pharmaceutical intervention. Celestara crumpled the letter in her hand, her crystalline skin flashing briefly with anger before she forced herself to calm. Pharmaceutical intervention. They wanted her to drug her children into compliance. 17 nannies in 6 months. She'd kept count, though she wished she hadn't. Each one came with impeccable credentials, decades of experience, specialized training in child psychology and trauma care, recommendations from the finest families in the empire. Each one had promised they could handle difficult children. Each one lasted less than 2 weeks. The queen set down the crumpled letter and rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. Through the crystalline windows of her office, she could see the palace gardens 3 floors below. The fountain sparkled in the sunlight. The flower beds were perfectly maintained. Children should have been playing there, her children, laughing and running and being 4 years old. Instead, they were locked in their quarters again, having another episode. Even from here, separated by walls and distance, she could feel the faint echo of their distress. Waves of empathic energy that her species naturally emitted during emotional turmoil. It was how Viridians communicated on a deeper level, sharing joy and sorrow through biological signals that bypassed language. For adult Viridians, the twins' distress was deeply uncomfortable, like having someone scream directly into your mind. For children experiencing trauma, their empathic emissions were devastating to anyone nearby. Headaches that could last for days. Nausea. Disorientation. 2 nannies had been hospitalized. Her children weren't doing it intentionally. They were 4 years old. They were grieving. They couldn't control their empathic abilities any more than a human child could control their tears. But that didn't make it easier to find someone willing to care for them. The door chimed softly. "Enter," Celestara said, trying to inject authority into her voice despite her exhaustion. Lord Vexler stepped in, tall and elegant in his formal robes. His silver-blue skin caught the light from the windows, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Your Majesty, I heard about Nanny 17. News travels fast. The palace staff talks. They're concerned." He moved closer to her desk, his tone shifting to something almost paternal. "Perhaps it's time to consider alternative solutions." "Such as?" Celestara knew what he was going to say. They'd had this conversation before. Medication. There are suppressants specifically designed for empathic overload in children. Perfectly safe. Used throughout the empire for younglings who manifest abilities early. "No." Her voice was sharp enough that Vexler took a step back. "I will not drug my children into submission. They're not malfunctioning. They're grieving. With respect, Your Majesty, their grief is affecting palace operations." 3 staff members were hospitalized last week when the twins had simultaneous episodes. The empathic waves reached the servant quarters. People are requesting transfers away from the residential wing. Celestara felt something crack inside her chest. Guilt. Anger. Helplessness. "I know what's happening in my own palace." "Then you know something must change. The children need help that goes beyond what a nanny can provide. They need their father." The words burst out before Celestara could stop them. "They need him alive and holding them and telling them stories before bed. But I can't give them that. So I'm trying to give them the next best thing, someone who can help them through their grief. Is that too much to ask?" Vexler was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "No, Your Majesty. It's not too much. But we've tried 17 candidates. Perhaps the problem isn't the nannies. Perhaps the children need a different kind of intervention." "Find me another nanny," Celestara said firmly. "There has to be someone in this galaxy capable of caring for 2 traumatized children. We've exhausted the traditional candidates. The best empaths, psychologists, and caregivers in the Empire have all tried and failed. Then try non-traditional candidates. I don't care if they're qualified or experienced or even Viridian. Find someone who can help my children." Vexler bowed, though his expression suggested he thought this was a waste of time. "As you wish, Your Majesty." After he left, Celestara stood and walked to the window. From here, she could see a small portion of the residential wing. Her children were somewhere in there, crying or screaming or sitting in silent misery. She could feel their pain like an echo of her own. 8 months ago, an assassin's blade had taken the king consort. Her husband. The twins' father. The investigation was still ongoing, but Celestara knew the truth. Someone wanted to destabilize the throne. What better way than to take the heart of the royal family? They'd succeeded. The twins had witnessed it. Seen their father fall. Seen the blood. Heard their mother's screams. No child should see that. No 4-year-old should carry that trauma. And now, 8 months later, Celestara was queen of an empire, mother to 2 broken children, and so tired she could barely remember what sleep felt like. She had to rule. Had to maintain stability. Had to show strength. But every night, she listened to her children cry and wondered if she was failing at the only job that truly mattered. Being their mother. Somewhere in the palace, Danny Torres pushed his cleaning cart down a marble corridor, completely unaware that his life was about to change. He hummed quietly to himself, an earth song his mom used to sing, and focused on his work. He had floors to mop. Trash to empty. Windows to clean. He was just a janitor. A nobody from Earth working a job that paid well enough to send money home. He had no idea that in a few hours, he'd be standing in the royal nursery, talking to 2 crying children about their dead father. No idea that he'd become the answer to a queen's desperate prayer. No idea that sometimes, the people who save us aren't the qualified professionals. Sometimes, they're just the ones who show up. Celestara stood in the doorway of the nursery, frozen in disbelief. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating from exhaustion. But no, the scene before her was real. Her children, her traumatized, explosive, impossible children who'd driven away 17 trained professionals, were sleeping peacefully. Actually sleeping. Not the restless, nightmare-filled sleep she'd become accustomed to. Real, deep, peaceful sleep. And they were curled up beside a human. A janitor, based on the faded coveralls with the palace maintenance logo. The human was asleep too, his head tilted back against the wall, mouth slightly open. Not exactly dignified. His dark hair was messy, and there was a smudge of something on his cheek. He looked young, maybe late 20s, completely ordinary. But her children's faces were calm. Relaxed. Prince Kale had his small hand clutched in the human's shirt. Princess Lyra was curled against the human's side, her luminescent patterns glowing softly in their sleep state rhythm. No distress waves radiating from them. No empathic storms that would send palace staff scrambling for pain medication. Just sleep. Normal, healthy, beautiful sleep. Celestara stepped closer, her footsteps silent on the plush nursery carpet. She'd learned to move quietly over the months, afraid of triggering her children's episodes. The human stirred at her approach, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her standing there in her formal robes, crown still on her head from the council meeting she just left, he went pale. Your Majesty, he tried to scramble to his feet without disturbing the twins. Failed spectacularly. His legs were clearly asleep from sitting in one position too long. Princess Lyra mumbled something unintelligible in her sleep and grabbed his arm tighter, pulling him back down. Don't move, Celestara commanded, her voice sharp. You'll wake them. The human froze, trapped between royal protocol and 2 sleeping children who clearly had no intention of letting him go. I'm sorry, I know I wasn't supposed to be in here, he said quickly, his voice low to avoid waking the twins. I was just cleaning the corridor outside, and I heard crying, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. I just wanted to check if they were okay. I didn't mean to fall asleep, Your Majesty. It won't happen again. What did you do? The Queen's voice was sharp. Not angry, exactly. Desperate. What did you do to make them sleep? Nothing. I just talked to them. About their dad. He winced suddenly, pressing a hand to his temple like something hurt. Celestara felt it too, a faint pulse of Lyra's dream state emotions. Her daughter was dreaming, and even in sleep, her empathic abilities leaked out. Mild for a Viridian, barely noticeable to most adults. But this human was reacting to it. His face scrunched up slightly, like he was trying to push through pain. How long have you been tolerating their empathic emissions? The Queen asked, studying him closely. Their what? She stared at him. You don't know what you're feeling right now? I mean, I've got a headache. Started when I came in here a few hours ago. But I get headaches a lot, so I just... He shrugged awkwardly, still trapped under her sleeping daughter. I'm used to it, I guess. Impossible. The empathic distress waves her children emitted had hospitalized trained professionals. Nanny number 12, a Zenthari empath with 40 years of experience, had collapsed after just 3 days. Nanny number 6 had developed chronic migraines that lasted weeks. This human thought it was just a regular headache. Celestara made a decision. Possibly an insane one. Probably an insane one. But watching her children sleep peacefully for the first time since their father's death, she didn't care about sanity anymore. What's your name? Danny Torres, Your Majesty. I work in sanitation services. 3rd shift. I've been here about 6 months. Not anymore. The Queen's voice was firm. As of now, you're the royal nanny. Danny blinked several times, like he was trying to process words that didn't make sense. I'm sorry, what? Temporary appointment, Celestara clarified, though she was already planning to make it permanent if this worked. Until we find someone properly qualified. You will be paid triple your current salary. Your family's financial obligations will be reviewed for possible assistance. You'll have quarters in the palace residential wing. Your Majesty, I'm not trained for this. I don't know anything about childcare. Or Viridian culture. Or, he gestured helplessly at the sleeping twins. I clean floors. That's what I know how to do. You kept my children calm for, she glanced at the time display on the wall. 4 hours. 17 trained professionals couldn't manage that for 17 days combined. I really think there's been some kind of mistake. Look at them, Celestara interrupted, her voice softening. Really look. Danny glanced down at the twins. Kale was breathing slowly, evenly, his small face peaceful. Lyra had stopped clutching his arms so tightly, now just resting against him comfortably. They looked like normal children having normal dreams. They need someone, the Queen continued. Someone who doesn't see them as problems to be solved or symptoms to be managed. Someone who just sees them. You're the first person they haven't driven away. Danny was quiet for a long moment, looking at the sleeping children. Then he said quietly, I have a sister back on Earth. She needs surgery. My mom's about to lose her house. I took this job to send money home. Your sister will have her surgery. Your mother will keep her house. Your family's debts will be cleared. It wasn't a bribe. It was simple pragmatism. She needed him, and he needed help. What do you say? Danny looked at the twins again. At Prince Kale, who'd been screaming for hours before Danny found them. At Princess Lyra, who'd been crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Both of them now sleeping peacefully, like the broken children they were had found something they desperately needed. Someone who just listened. When do I start? Danny asked. You already have. Celestara watched as the human carefully shifted, trying to get more comfortable without waking the twins. They stirred slightly but didn't wake, adjusting to his movements like they'd been sleeping beside him for years instead of hours. She should feel concerned. This was unprecedented. Inappropriate. A human janitor caring for the heirs to the Viridian throne? But all she felt was relief. Finally, her children were sleeping. Tomorrow would bring complications. Palace staff would be scandalized. Lord Vexler would have opinions. The Royal Council would demand explanations. But tonight, her children were sleeping peacefully for the first time in 8 months. And that was enough. 2 months into his unexpected promotion, Danny finally understood why he succeeded where trained professionals had failed. It wasn't because he was smarter or more skilled. It wasn't because he had some special gift. It was something much simpler, and somehow more complicated. It started with a conversation with the Queen's personal physician, Dr. Harvin. The doctor was a tall, thin Viridian with deep blue skin and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He'd been monitoring the twins' progress since Danny took over, and he'd requested a meeting to discuss the results. Their empathic stability has improved remarkably, Harvin said, reviewing charts on his data display. The graphs showed colored lines that meant nothing to Danny, but the doctor seemed impressed. The frequency and intensity of their distress emissions have decreased by 70%. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Danny shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He still wasn't used to formal meetings in palace offices. 2 months ago, he'd been eating lunch in the maintenance break room. Now he was discussing royal children with the Queen's personal physician. I'm not really doing anything special, Danny said honestly. Just being there. Listening when they want to talk. Playing when they want to play. The previous nannies tried that. Harvin's tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Did they? Danny asked. He wasn't trying to be difficult. He genuinely wondered if they had. Harvin pulled up more records, scrolling through files. Nanny number 12 was a Zenthari empath. Her species is naturally attuned to emotional states. She was trained specifically in emotional regulation and trauma response. 40 years of experience. She lasted 4 days before the twins' emissions hospitalized her. What happened? According to her report, the children rejected her approach from the beginning. She tried to teach them meditation techniques, breathing exercises, emotional control strategies. Harvin looked at Danny curiously. You don't do any of that? No. I let them be upset when they're upset. Cry when they need to cry. Danny thought about last night, when Kale had woken up from a nightmare and sobbed for 20 minutes straight. Danny had just held him, letting him cry it out. We talk about their dad without trying to process it or whatever. Just talk. Like he was a real person they loved, not a trauma they need to get over. Fascinating. Harvin made notes on his data pad. And the empathic emissions don't affect you. They give me headaches. Pretty bad ones sometimes. Danny rubbed his temple, where a dull ache had been sitting since breakfast. Lyra had been particularly upset about going to her etiquette lesson. But I've had migraines since I was 16. Car accident back on Earth. Messed up something in my head. So I'm kind of used to functioning through head pain. Harvin's expression shifted to something like understanding. That explains part of it. Most species find empathic distress waves unbearable. Physically painful in a way that makes functioning impossible. But humans have remarkably high pain tolerance. You're not unaffected, you're just resistant enough to push through it. Danny had never thought of it that way. His ability to handle the twins wasn't some special skill. It was just his screwed-up head from a teenage car accident making him stubborn enough to ignore pain that would flatten other species. Over the following weeks, Danny identified other reasons his approach worked where others had failed. He started keeping a journal, not because anyone asked him to, but because he wanted to understand it himself. If this actually worked, maybe it could help other families with struggling kids. Emotional honesty was the first thing he wrote down. Viridian culture valued strength and stoicism, especially among royalty. The previous nannies had tried to help the twins move past their grief, to be strong like proper royal children should be. Danny didn't care about that. When he missed his own dad, who died of cancer 7 years ago, he said so. When the twins wanted to talk about death and sadness and scary things, he didn't redirect them to positive topics like the child psychology books probably recommended. He let them be sad. Let them be angry. Let them feel whatever they were feeling. One afternoon, Princess Lyra asked him, "Does it make us weak? Being sad all the time?" "No," Danny had said immediately. "It makes you human. I mean, not literally human. But you know what I mean. It makes you real. People who never feel sad are either lying or broken." She'd thought about that for a long time, then nodded like something had clicked into place. Creative problem-solving was another factor. When Princess Lyra refused to attend her language lessons, the tutor, a stern Viridian woman who took education very seriously, complained that the princess was being difficult and disrespectful. Danny sat with Lyra and asked why she didn't want to go. "The tutor keeps talking about father," Lyra said quietly, her luminescent patterns pulsing with distress. "About how he spoke 6 languages perfectly. About how I need to be like him. About how he'd be disappointed if I didn't try harder." Danny felt anger flash through him. "She said your dad would be disappointed. She says I have a legacy to uphold." Danny went to the tutor and had what he later described to his roommate as a very professional conversation about not comparing traumatized children to their dead parents. The tutor complained to palace administration. Danny didn't care. They got a new language tutor who taught through games and songs instead of lectures about legacy. When formal lessons didn't work, Danny made things up. Math became treasure hunts with clues written in numbers. History became storytelling sessions where Danny acted out different characters with silly voices that made the twins laugh. Science became let's figure out how this works experiments with whatever they could find. He had no formal training, so he improvised constantly. And somehow, it worked better than the carefully structured curricula the previous nannies had used. Pack bonding was something Dr. Harvin explained to him during another checkup. Humans form emotional attachments faster and deeper than most species. It's an evolutionary advantage from your homeworld. Tight-knit social groups meant better survival in dangerous environments. Danny had looked it up later. Apparently, humans were famous in the galaxy for adopting things. Other species. Random animals. Even inanimate objects they gave names and personalities to. It was considered weird but harmless. But with the twins, it wasn't weird. It was essential. Danny genuinely cared about Kale and Lyra. Within weeks, they weren't just a job or a responsibility. They were his kids. Not biologically, obviously, but in every way that mattered. When Kale had nightmares, Danny lost sleep too. When Lyra was sad, Danny felt it in his chest like physical pain. When they laughed, really laughed, the kind of belly laughs that made them fall over, Danny couldn't help but smile so wide his face hurt. The professional nannies had maintained appropriate emotional distance. They'd clocked in, done their jobs, clocked out. They'd cared about the children's well-being in an abstract, professional way. Danny didn't know how to do that. He was all in, emotionally invested, completely attached. And that, more than anything else, was why it worked. The twins trusted him completely because they felt his genuine care. Not professional obligation. Not duty. Just pure, uncomplicated love. But not everyone was happy about his success. Lord Vexler watched the humans' growing influence with increasing concern. He'd spent months positioning himself as the Queen's closest advisor, offering guidance during her grief. The twins' instability had worked in his favor. Chaos meant the Queen needed his steady presence. Now, with the children stabilizing under the humans' care, his influence was waning. He began spreading carefully worded concerns throughout the court. Nothing that could be directly traced back to him. Just questions. Implications. Seeds of doubt. The human is quite close to the royal family now, isn't he? Earth is such a minor power. Strange that they'd have someone so perfectly positioned. I wonder what his real agenda is. The whispers grew louder. And then an incident gave Vexler exactly the ammunition he needed. Princess Lyra got sick. The evaluation took place in the Grand Council chamber, a massive room with crystalline walls that seemed to amplify every sound. The ceiling stretched up at least 50 feet, covered in intricate carvings that told the history of the Viridian Empire. Danny had cleaned this room once, back when he was still a janitor. Back when life was simpler. 50 council members sat in a semicircle around him, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. They wore formal robes in various colors that Danny had learned represented different regions and political factions. Most were Viridian, their crystalline skin catching the light, but a few were from allied species. All of them looked at him like he was something stuck to their shoe. Danny stood in the center of the chamber, wearing clothes he'd borrowed from the palace staff because he didn't own anything formal enough for this. The shirt was slightly too tight. The pants were slightly too long. He felt like a kid playing dress-up in his dad's clothes. He felt like a fraud. Lord Vexler stood at a podium, looking every bit the distinguished politician. His robes were deep purple, the color of high nobility, and his voice carried across the chamber with practiced authority. Danny Torres, Vexler began, and the way he said the name made it sound like an accusation. Human. Age 28. Employed as a sanitation worker before his unprecedented appointment as royal nanny. Danny's hands were sweating. He clasped them behind his back so no one could see them shake. Let us review his qualifications, Vexler continued, pulling up a display that showed Danny's records for everyone to see. No formal education beyond Earth's basic schooling. Dropped out of community college after one semester. No training in childcare, child psychology, or childhood education. No knowledge of Viridian culture, history, or customs. No certifications. No credentials. No experience with children prior to this appointment. Each word landed like a hammer. Danny watched his inadequate resume displayed for 50 powerful aliens to judge. High school diploma. 6 months of college before his dad got sick and he had to work full-time. Various manual labor jobs. Janitor. In short, Vexler said, his voice dripping with disdain, no qualifications whatsoever. A council member in the front row, an elderly Viridian woman with silver skin, spoke up. Lord Vexler, the humans' lack of traditional credentials is concerning, but the children have shown improvement. Temporary improvement, Vexler interrupted. Let us not forget the incident 3 weeks ago when Mr. Torres gave Princess Lyra human medication for her fever. He could have killed her through sheer incompetence. Danny flinched. That had been a mistake. A terrible, scary mistake. Lyra had been burning up with fever, and Danny had panicked. He'd given her medicine from Earth without thinking about the fact that her biology was completely different from human biology. She'd been fine. The human medicine hadn't hurt her. But it could have. That mistake still kept Danny up at night. The royal physician had to intervene, Vexler continued. Mr. Torres doesn't understand Viridian physiology. He doesn't understand our customs. He breaks protocols daily. Just last week, he allowed the children to eat dessert before dinner. He cancelled formal etiquette lessons for playtime. He teaches them Earth games instead of proper Viridian history. More council members were nodding now. Danny could feel the room turning against him. Most concerning, Vexler said, his voice dropping to something almost sorrowful, is the security risk. Earth is a minor power with limited influence in galactic politics. What better way to gain influence than to place an agent close to the royal family? Close to the line of succession. I'm not a spy, Danny said, the words bursting out before he could stop them. Silence, Vexler snapped. You will speak when spoken to. Danny's face burned with humiliation. He looked at Queen Celestara, sitting on her throne at the front of the chamber. Her face was expressionless, revealing nothing. Was she doubting him too? The evaluation began. They asked him about Viridian history. Danny stumbled through answers, getting maybe 20% correct. He knew the current queen's name and that the empire was old. That was about it. They asked about royal protocols, proper forms of address, ceremonial requirements, diplomatic etiquette. Danny had broken most of these rules without even knowing they existed. Failed. They asked about child development theory, learning stages, age-appropriate education, psychological frameworks. Danny had never studied any of it. Failed. They asked about Viridian physiology, common childhood illnesses, proper treatments, dietary requirements. He'd given Lyra the wrong medicine just 3 weeks ago. Failed spectacularly. By the time they finished, Danny's failure was absolute and undeniable. He'd gotten maybe 15% of the questions right, and most of those were lucky guesses. The council chamber felt like it was closing in on him. 50 pairs of eyes, all seeing his inadequacy laid bare. This human is unqualified, Vexler announced with barely concealed satisfaction. I move for his immediate removal and deportation from the planet. The royal children require proper care from qualified professionals, not well-meaning amateurs. Several council members voiced immediate agreement. Danny heard the words embarrassment and security risk, and what were we thinking? Queen Celestara sat forward on her throne. Before we vote, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, I would hear from Danny himself. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Danny looked at the faces staring at him. 50 powerful aliens who'd already decided he wasn't good enough. He thought about lying, trying to make excuses, but he was too tired for that. No, he said quietly. I don't. Everything Lord Vexler said is true. I'm not qualified. I don't know your history. I don't know your protocols. I don't understand your medical treatments. He took a breath. I'm just a janitor who got lucky. Vexler smiled. Victory was close. But, Danny continued, his voice growing stronger, I know that Prince Kale has nightmares about the assassination. I know he wakes up at 2:17 in the morning almost every single night. I know he needs someone to sit with him and hold his hand until he falls back asleep, and it usually takes about 4 to 5 minutes. He looked directly at the council members. I know that Princess Lyra goes completely quiet when she's overwhelmed. Not crying. Not tantruming. Just silent. And you can't force her to talk or eat or do anything. You just have to sit with her and wait until she's ready. Sometimes that takes hours. His voice cracked slightly. I know they both miss their father so much that it physically hurts them. I know that everyone keeps telling them to be strong, to move on, to act like proper royalty. But they can't. They're 4 years old. They're just kids who lost their dad. The chamber was completely silent now. I know that Kale likes his breakfast at exactly 7 o'clock. Not 6:58. Not 7:02. 7. And if you're late, his whole day is thrown off. I know that Lyra won't eat in the formal dining room because it smells like the cologne her father used to wear, and it makes it too sad to eat. Danny's eyes were stinging. I know they laugh at my stupid Earth jokes even when they don't understand them, because they like seeing me laugh. I know they trust me. And I know I would do absolutely anything to keep them safe and help them heal. He looked at Vexler. That's not in any textbook. That's not a qualification you can test for. But those kids haven't had an empathic episode in 3 weeks. They're sleeping through the night. They're eating regularly. They're learning and playing and slowly getting better. 17 qualified professionals couldn't do that. So maybe, just maybe, qualifications aren't everything. The chamber remained silent. Then the massive doors at the back opened, and two small figures walked in, hand in hand. Prince Kale and Princess Lyra, still in their pajamas, their faces determined. And everything changed. 6 months after the evaluation, Danny sat in his office, an actual office, not a janitor's closet, reviewing applications on his data pad. The office was modest by palace standards, but to Danny it still felt surreal. He had a desk. A window overlooking the gardens. A title on the door that read Royal Child Advocate. There are 43 requests this week, his assistant Lisa told him, walking in with a physical folder full of documents. Lisa was human too, brought in as part of the new Earth Viridian cultural exchange program that had sprung up after Danny's success with the twins. She was organized, efficient, and had quickly become indispensable. 43. Danny looked up from his data pad in surprise. Last week it was 20. Word is spreading. Human methods work. Lisa set the folder on his desk. These are just the formal requests. We've got another 15 informal inquiries from families who are nervous about going through official channels. Danny rubbed his eyes. He'd been up late with Prince Kale, who'd had a nightmare about starting formal schooling next month. We don't have enough trained caregivers for 43 families. I know. That's why I've started a waiting list. And I reached out to Earth. There are at least 24 humans interested in coming here for childcare positions. Most of them have some experience with kids, teachers, daycare workers, that sort of thing. It had started small, almost accidentally. After Danny's success with the royal twins became public knowledge, other noble families began asking careful, quiet questions. What exactly did the human do? How did he manage children that trained Viridian nannies couldn't handle? One brave family, lesser nobility with a daughter who'd been struggling with severe anxiety, requested a human caregiver. Danny helped train a young woman from Earth named Rachel who'd worked in a preschool back home. Within a month, the child's anxiety episodes had decreased significantly. Then another family requested help. Then another. Then another. The results were undeniable. Human caregivers didn't have magical abilities. They couldn't sense emotions empathically or communicate telepathically. But their approaches worked in ways that traditional Viridian methods didn't. Emotional honesty instead of stoic strength. Play-based learning instead of rigid curriculum. Letting children express difficult feelings instead of teaching them emotional control. Treating kids like people instead of small adults who needed to be shaped into proper citizens. Simple things. Human things. But they worked. Danny had become a consultant almost by accident, training both human caregivers coming from Earth and Viridian professionals who wanted to learn these new methods. What the media had started calling human-style childcare was becoming a revolution in how the Viridian Empire thought about raising children. I've got 3 Viridian therapists asking for training sessions next week, Lisa continued, flipping through her notes. And the Royal Academy wants you to give a lecture on emotional processing in children. They're adding it to their teacher training curriculum. Danny laughed, though it came out a bit overwhelmed. I'm not qualified to lecture at the Royal Academy. You weren't qualified to be royal nanny either. Didn't stop you. She had a point. His data pad chimed with an incoming call. Queen Celestara's personal code. Danny answered immediately. Your Majesty. Danny. The Queen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but genuinely happy. I wanted you to hear this before the official announcement. Earth and the Viridian Empire are signing a major treaty this afternoon. Official allies. Equal status in the Galactic Council. Danny's mouth fell open. Because of the childcare thing. Because humans proved they bring something valuable to the galaxy. Not weapons or advanced technology. Something more important, a different way of seeing people. Of caring for them. The Queen smiled. The Council decided that any species capable of healing our children's hearts deserves respect and partnership. After the call ended, Danny sat in his office, trying to process that information. Earth, little, insignificant Earth, was now an equal ally of one of the galaxy's major powers. Because he'd talked to 2 sad kids about their dead father. Life was weird. That evening, Danny found Kale and Lyra in the garden, practicing their formal presentation skills for an upcoming ceremony. They were 9 now in Viridian years, roughly equivalent to human 8-year-olds. Confident, poised, ready to take on royal responsibilities. But when they saw Danny, they dropped the formality immediately and ran over like the kids they still were. Danny. Lyra hugged him tight. Did you hear? We're getting a new teacher who studied your methods. She's Viridian but she trained with human educators on Earth. I heard. What do you think about that? I think it's good, Kale said seriously. More kids should get to learn the way we did. Where it's okay to be sad sometimes. Where you can talk about hard things without getting in trouble. Danny felt his chest tighten with pride and emotion. You guys are going to be amazing leaders someday. Because we had an amazing teacher, Lyra said simply. They walked through the gardens together, talking about their day, their worries about starting advanced studies, their excitement about an upcoming trip to a neighboring system. Normal kid stuff. Danny thought about the journey that had brought him here. From janitor to nanny to royal child advocate. From nobody to someone who'd accidentally changed how an entire empire thought about childhood. But the title he was proudest of was the simplest one, the person Kale and Lyra trusted. The person they ran to when they were scared or sad or happy or excited. Just Danny. That night, as Danny was finishing paperwork in his office, he got a video call from his mom back on Earth. She was in her new house, the one she'd been able to buy after the Queen cleared the family's debts. Saw the news about the treaty, she said, smiling. My son, the diplomat. I'm not a diplomat, Mom. I'm still just a nanny. You're the nanny who changed how an entire empire thinks about children. Who helped traumatized kids heal. Who showed the galaxy that humans have something special to offer. Her voice grew softer. Your dad would be so proud. After they hung up, Danny stood on his office balcony, looking at the alien stars. 5 years ago, he'd been scrubbing floors and sending money home, hoping to pay off debts before he was old. Now he was changing galactic policy, training caregivers, and helping build bridges between species. All because he'd heard kids crying and decided to check if they were okay. All because he'd stayed when staying was hard. All because he'd cared. The galaxy was vast and full of advanced species with incredible abilities. But sometimes, the most powerful thing wasn't strength or technology or ancient wisdom. Sometimes, it was just showing up for people who needed you. Sometimes, it was just being human. The end.